thing that we hear a lot is people not knowing where they are, thinking that their mum and dad are still alive, and those kind of things. What top tips have you got for family members who are working with that?
Yeah, okay, slightly different subject. So not knowing where one is, it depends on, is the person in their lifelong home? Have they recently moved? What cues can you put into place? Really simple things like a sign that tells someone where they are. Obviously, if you can get a person there supporting to orient someone, that's great. And actually, technology more and more often, technology is a tricky one for this particular generation of older people because not everyone is particularly comfortable with it. So if you've got a mum or dad that's really comfortable, is using Gmail and maybe Amazon or whatever the talking apps are. Clue me in. What are they?
Alexa.
Alexa, thank you. I couldn't think of her name. Then that's not going to be a problem. But if someone is quite fearful, for example, of those kind of things, then maybe be mindful, because it could then be quite confusing and or even threatening. Yeah, I mean, there are so many different things you can do. So in the kitchen, you can have clear cupboard faces to orient to where things are in the kitchen. If it's a literal thing of like, when I step out my front door, I'm no longer sure where my home is, then you can have, watches that can call loved ones and have a phone conversation as to how to orient someone back again. The issue of not recognizing family members is much harder, and indeed missing someone who is asking after someone. It's probably the question we get the most, that causes also the most distress for the person living with dementia, but also the people around them, is asking over, for example, a husband that has passed away 2 or 3 years prior, and that's not in that person's immediate memory. Because there's this dilemma on the spot of, do I risk distressing this person by telling them that their loved one has passed away? Do I lie to them? Do I do some version in between? And like with most things in life, there's no clear-cut answer to this. But I would point you to a particular piece of research that actually delves exactly into this, and talks about the different ways of responding that with different versions of truth in the answer. And the idea is, the ultimate idea is always to avoid unnecessary distress. In life, there is distress. We can never avoid distress altogether. It's part of living a good life, is to have highs and lows, because we need to process the lows. But unnecessary distress, especially for a person who's vulnerable due to cognitive decline, is what you want to avoid altogether. So there are different techniques relating to that I can go more into.
Yeah, give us one.
Okay,
yeah.
so the most, I don't want to use the word superficial, but I can't think of another one right now. The one that delves the least deep, if you like, is a simple distraction. So if the person is not particularly distressed, and you think you might get away with, for example, pointing at a beautiful flower and offering a cup of tea, great, because there's been no distress caused, and obviously it didn't run so deep. The risk one takes with just simple distraction is that you're not validating someone's feelings. And if you think about you and me, if I was to tell you something deeply distressing and you went, right, okay, oh, did you see that bird fly by? It could be very painful for me, like, oh, you haven't heard me, you haven't seen me as a human being. So you run that risk, but because the person's memory might be incredibly short term, it might be the safest, kindest. What you're going for is to be kind, right? Kindest option. If it fails and or doesn't feel like the kindest option, then the idea is to try and validate. So you need to meet someone where they are. That can be a metaphor. It can be emotionally sort of validating that someone, I'm really sorry that you're feeling lost, sad, angry, whatever. It can be literal as well. There are examples of needing to get, someone's under the table because they're fearful, or they're having hallucinations, and you need to get under the table with them to meet them where they are, to then start a process of calming and healing. So validation, and then redirection is one area. Gosh, there are so many different ways of approaching this. I can talk more.
No. So if someone wants to kind of look more into this, there's you mentioned piece of research.
Yes.
What's the title?
By the Mental Health Foundation, Truth and Lies in Dementia Care.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And you're one of the authors on that.
I am one of the authors on that, which is why I'm waffling on about it.
Exactly. And also something, very happy to have longer conversation with people around that.
Definitely, yeah.
And you mentioned people not recognising family members, and I remember this was kind of one of the foundational moments for me and Nathan when we were setting up the company, because his grandmother was living with dementia, and he was really quite distressed because he wasn't recognised. He didn't feel validated, and I think one of the conversations I had with him that kind of led us down the path to setting up the company was sort of saying, what's your role there? Why are you going? And it was for his grandmother to feel better, to feel loved, and it's like, great. So all that matters is that she's got someone that loves her next to her, validating her, acknowledging her, and reframing that for him made the whole experience of going completely different.
Yes, can take the kind of personal sting out of it. The other thing is, we don't ever really know how someone's brain is truly working, and emotional memory works very different from the sort of facts and figures style of memory. And so many stories I've heard of families who haven't been recognized for so long, and then suddenly there's that glimmer of recognition, and sometimes it's a second, a moment, and it passes again. But I think the trick is not to go in with that hope. If you get that, then wonderful. But just like you say, it is absolutely about just one human being being there, providing a joy and support for another human being. And the fact that they don't know it's you, me, Alise, Kirtley, has to be by the by to some degree, although that is painful. Of course it is. Yeah,
totally agree. It's that that different cognition and emotional kind of understanding, and so much anecdotal evidence of people being in much calmer, more content moods for 24, 48 hours after having had a pleasurable experience, even though 5 minutes later they couldn't say what that experience had been.
Absolutely. And one of the most astonishing moments, and I'd been in the sector for I think 11 years by then, was when I was with someone we were supporting, and she looked at a photograph of her and her husband, who had been together since they were 14. They'd met when they were 14 and dated shortly afterwards, and a long marriage. And she lovingly stroked the photograph of her and her husband with their arms around one another. And she said in third person, quote, "She really loves him and he loves her too." And she didn't seem to comprehend. I mean, I can't really know what was going on for her, but she didn't seem to comprehend that she was her. But she still knew there was love there. There was still, and she said it's so full of emotion and love in the moment. So whilst it might not have been, had her husband been sitting there watching it, he might have felt slightly stung by that. But I thought, my goodness, what an amazing example of the way that the brain works, and in a totally different way, where there's just still so much love and connection, even though she can't quite associate her on the couch right now with her in that photograph from 10, 15 years prior. So we don't know what those moments do. I might not know the person's name, but I've still got that underlying sense of love and connection and memory to some degree.
And she's feeling that love
totally.
And the whole research into well-being and positive psychology is that if we are experiencing positive emotions, and love being one of the big ones, then it makes a massive difference to both our quality of life and also our resilience to deal with more challenging moments.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and if you do, I mean, there are so many well-being frameworks out there, but we've chosen the PERMA One, because there's so much evidence to suggest it's so accessible to so many people. We all know what positive emotions are and feel like. We know what it's like to engage in things, to have relationships with people. And if one can, and even a family member can go into that room with someone that might not know exactly what your role is to them and your first and last name, but just think about positive emotion and engaging well and meaningfully with that person, and the relationship you can build even in the space of those 5 minutes or 1 hour or whatever it is, and so on with that framework, then yeah, the kind of facts and figures just don't really matter anymore.